Just give it a sec. Awesome, we're on. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining in to Oklahoma City Design and Tech, our March meetup. Excited for what's going on this month. Just a couple of announcements to get started. I'm Tori Wilbanks. I'm one of our co-organizers along with Doji and Gaia and a few other faces that you'll see along the way. So just letting you know, look, we're sponsored by Techlahoma. We're a professional network with more than 4,000 information technology workers. So from UX designers, UI designers, we also have developers, AI hobbyists, a bunch of different people who come to our variety of meetups each month. And our goal is to, provide free access to that tech education.
You're on mute, Tori.
Tori, you muted yourself.
Thank you. A couple of announcements for how we're going to operate today. One new thing, we're going to share out a link towards the end of this. So if anyone has any Q&A, we'll be able to participate live in our Google Hangout. And so you can share your video if you want, you can share your audio, and actually really get to ask Coy in person some of those questions if you end up saving them up. We're also going to do all of our chat in our Slack channel. So under the Techlahoma Slack, we're in the UG OKC Design Tech Slack channel. So please feel free to make all your chats in there. This is going to be a little interactive, so I'm going to want you guys to get your emojis ready and be able to chat that way. We have disabled the chats in Twitch and YouTube, so we can try and direct everyone to one area in Slack. And we're trying this out, so open to feedback after all of this. Also, real quickly, next month we're having a colleague of mine from a company called Global Payments, Emily Olson, and she'll be talking to us about service design. So if you don't know what that is, or if you're curious to dive in a little bit deeper, she's a service designer for Global Payments, and we'll hear more from her at the end of April. But for now, we have a friend of mine from DC, Coy Hernandez, and he's going to talk to us about breaking free from our cognitive bias. So Coy is a designer who's passionate about understanding who our users are. He's an advocate for human-centered design principles. And he just moved from AARP Innovation Labs over to Solemn, and I'll let him give a little bit more information about his background. But we are really excited to have him and talk about those cognitive biases and how to change that up. So without further ado, Coy, I'll hand it off to you. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll let you jump in.
Great. Thank you so much, Tori, for that introduction. And thank you all for giving me the opportunity to present this topic on breaking free from your unconscious biases. Now, I just want to get to know you all just a little bit informally, but if you can just post your favorite emoji into chat, that would be great.
Okay, so I'm looking at the chat, and we'll give it a moment for people to start typing a little bit. I see a couple of people typing.
Hopefully there's a lot of happy emojis.
And we have at least 16 people on the Techlahoma Twitch, which is awesome. Going virtual has proven to be just a different beast.
Yeah.
I don't know what you doing some of your meetups in Virginia and
DC
area.
We got an interesting emoji. This is probably very Slack centric, but we have the party parrot.
I love that. Party parrot.
Doji loves
You've seen the party parrot?
Yeah. So the party parrot, there's a face with hearts, and then there's also like a forehead slap, a female forehead slap.
Okay. Well, I definitely appreciate you all sharing your favorite emojis. I'm not sure if it's like one of my favorites, but it is one of my most used, and that's the laughing emoji with the tears on it whenever I'm like texting my friends and stuff.
Yeah.
But also with Slack, I just discovered that they have like a waffle emoji that I thought was a pizza. So I've been sending pizzas to, I guess, my coworkers, and they were like, "Why are you sending us waffles?" So If you see that emoji, it's actually a waffle, not a pizza. So yeah.
I just shared that.
So just a little bit about myself. As mentioned, my name is Coy Hernandez, and I'm now an experienced design consultant for Slalom. And what that means is that I help organizations think through their challenges, develop an understanding for their users, and also to solve problems in creative ways through the human-centered design approaches. I have a background in graphic design, but I eventually pivoted into the realm of UX and experience design back in 2018. I also have 3 adult dogs and 1 puppy. So on the top left corner is Jax, top right corner is Mumford, bottom left corner is the husky. His name is Wyatt. And our newest addition to our family is Ellis, and his name is Ellis, and he's on the bottom right corner. And also with that said, I grew up in New Jersey, but I live in Alexandria, Virginia now. So I'm definitely excited to be here and leading this workshop on getting unstuck. But before we dive into the meat and the tasty bits of this presentation, I want to do a quick exercise. So with the information that I have provided about myself, what kind of car do you think I drive? And you can post your answers into chat. And don't worry, I won't be offended. This is a quick exercise.
These aren't examples of the cars that you're driving, right?
Say it again?
These cars aren't yours, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, no. These are.
We're hinting at a sedan. All right. So we're having a few guesses come in. Yeah, I'm going to second. So Grant says none. I'm going to second that one. I feel like it could be a no car, only because we live in DC.
Okay.
Someone says a Kia. We have Mini Cooper.
Okay.
Which is very could be designer, stereotypical, hipstery. Yeah. I would not say Bronco. That's a little too, I don't know, it feels so rugged with, I don't know,
okay.
this designer look. I don't think that would be a rugged thing. We have one more person typing. Oh, she says, I have a Mini and I'm not a hipster. But she's in tech, so
So yeah, I mean, that's definitely awesome. Whoever said Kia takes the prize. So I have a 2015 Kia Soul. I got it at a time when I had 2 dogs, but now since I have 4, it's kind of getting cramped. So I think I might have to do an upgrade later on.
Wow! All right, good job, Alex.
Yeah, congrats.
Someone guessed right.
So yeah, definitely. That was definitely fun hearing your guesses. So the purpose of that quick exercise was to demonstrate what we call the rivers of thinking. And rivers of thinking is a phrase that Edward de Bono coined to describe the neural pathways that form from every experiences that we encounter in our life, ever since we were children. So whenever we face a challenge, we channel all available information from that river in order to make a quick decision. So you can imagine this as being on top of a mountain, right? So with every rain, new streams are developed, and the more rainstorms that occur, the deeper and stronger that stream becomes until eventually it's a river. So with that said, our brains are naturally hardwired to not find original solutions, but to apply past successful ones to new problems. We like staying on course, and we like staying within our rivers. So in order to guess what kind of car I drove, you went into your river of people who look or act like Coy or who is in the same profession as Coy to make that educated guess. And oftentimes when people get stuck, they are stuck within a specific river. And however, in order for us to be creative and to think expansively, which is thinking beyond our immediate and personal context, and to get ourselves out of our own creative rut, you have to break out of our rivers of thinking. And how we do that is thinking laterally, or what Edward de Bono calls lateral thinking. And lateral thinking is being a bit more deliberate and systematic and thinking about other ways to arrive at a solution when approaching or trying to take on a challenge. So going back to the mountain and rivers example, lateral thinking are the tiny little streams that break out from the main river. They are still different and they take a different path, but they are still parallel and in line with that main river. So if you're wondering, how do we practice lateral thinking? So back when I was employed at AARP Innovation Labs, we had a set of innovation behaviors. And one of these innovation behaviors we frequently embodied was called freshness. And freshness is the behavior of constantly seeking new internal and external stimuli to disrupt our thinking and to help inspire new ideas, and to also see things from a different frame of mind. We use dolphins to represent freshness, as dolphins are known to break from their pods in order to scout for new feeding grounds. And once they have found a suitable feeding ground, they relay that information back to their pod. And without this need to explore or seek out new different feeding grounds, then dolphins would probably have a difficult time surviving in the vast oceans. And if you're wondering, what does freshness look like for us humans? So an example of this is my coworker or ex-coworker, Amy. And she would occasionally play Minecraft with her teenage son in order to better understand his hobbies, the gamer life, and to also understand the world of young teenage boys. Another example is my mom, who's a nurse. And this was years ago, but one day when I came home from school, I realized that she was watching a show on the BET network. I thought nothing of it until I observed that she was staying on that network more than her usual go-to networks, such as Lifetime and the Hallmark channels. And I also noticed that she subscribed to Ebony magazine, which is a magazine for African American and Black women. So out of curiosity, I asked her why she has this magazine subscription and why she's spending more time on the BET network than her usual other networks. And she told me that the reason why is that she's trying to get a better understanding and form stronger connections with her Black coworkers and also her patients. And as a teenager, I just brushed it off. But now as an adult and within working in this profession, I realized that my mom was embodying human-centered design principles. And though BET and Ebony magazine is just a small fraction of what the African American and Black experience was, she was making small efforts to experience a new perspective, but also to make larger connections with the community around her. And though we can practice the innovation behavior of freshness as much as we want, and we try to stay curious and try to be mindful of every inspiration that comes our way, we also must be aware of our own cognitive biases and know how and when to handle them. So let's talk a little bit about cognitive biases. You can think of them as a collection of rivers or mental shortcuts that have evolved in our brains over time, and they help shape our judgment about the world around us. And studies say that there are about 12 or 25 cognitive biases, and Wikipedia has even a model that says they have 153. But either way, they're all mental shortcuts that help us make quick decisions. And they're often a result of our brain's attempt trying to simplify information processing. And I'm not like a neuroscientist or whatever, but I do know that our brain is a powerful and magnificent machine that runs on autopilot. So our breathing, blinking, and other internal processes such as digestion are all commands and decisions of our brain. And the brain requires these mental shortcuts to help us make sense of the world around us and reach decisions relatively quickly in order to give itself a break. So it is estimated that the average adult makes about 35,000 remotely conscious decisions each day. So imagine having to make all 35K decisions in a semi-conscious and deliberate way. We'll definitely be exhausted. You know, I can't really comprehend that, making 35K decisions But these mental shortcuts help us make those 35K decisions more efficiently. So for us to break through our barriers, we have to be aware of when these biases are happening and what these biases are. We have to learn how to slow down our thinking and to also be more systematic in our approach to solving problems. So from our experiences, here are 4 biases that might be the reason why you're getting stuck, and also additionally a few tools that you can use to break free from these biases. So the first bias that I would like to talk about is called the curse of knowledge bias. And it is the inability to separate yourself from the knowledge that you already know. And it is this unfair assumption that others share the same knowledge as you. So when you're under the curse of knowledge, we assume people know more about a topic than they actually do. We are especially susceptible to the curse once we gain an expert level knowledge of a particular subject. And we experience this because we spend so much time in a particular subject that we struggle to remember that other people have different viewpoints and knowledge levels. And it is understandable to forget that we were once novices at a time. We definitely take great pride in being expert at something. We definitely worked hard at it too. However, we cannot always assume that everyone knows what we know. Oftentimes, I find myself to be the only designer in the room. And sometimes whenever we're reviewing work provided by another agency or another designer, I have to remind myself that the feedback that I provide in an open conversation with other stakeholders might not be easily understood. So here I am talking about kerning, leading, and talking about design principles like color theory and Gestalt theory. People around me are just staring at me confused. And when I realize that, because of all their puzzled faces, I have to take it back down a few levels where we can all understand and be on the same page. And though we can't unlearn what we have already learned, you can be mindful and take a step back and try to look at things as if you are experiencing it for the first time. And a helpful practice to combat this curse of knowledge is practicing what we call having a beginner's mindset. And a beginner's mindset is trying to approach a problem, a solution, a task, or activity like a beginner. So for example, if you are preparing and eating oatmeal for breakfast for the first time, take the time to read the instructions. Be observant of everything from start to finish. Take note of the texture, the taste, the smell. If you're preparing eggs or bacon, take note of the different steps involved, the texture of the bacon before it's being cooked to the texture of the bacon when it is cooked. Hopefully you all like crispy bacon. Same thing with the eggs, like what are the steps involved in making scrambled eggs or sunny side up eggs? We're all masters at preparing breakfast, but we all have to take this step back and be aware of all these different processes involved in approaching things like a beginner. Another situation that you can practice having a beginner's mindset is, of course, driving. I'm assuming that we all have licenses right now and that we have been driving for years. So with that said, driving for us is almost second nature. For me, I instantly just get into my car or my Kia and insert the keys and then just drive off. However, I try to make it as a habit to practice safety nowadays, now that I have 4 dogs. Whenever I enter my car now, I embody this beginner's mindset where I imagine it back to the days when I was 16 and just learning how to drive. I go back and check my mirrors. I adjust my seat. I test out all my buttons and all these different toggles. And I just try to pretend I'm new at this in order for me to stop myself from going to autopilot mode and to put myself in a position where I'm ensuring the safety of myself, but also the family around me. And so practicing a beginner's mindset allows us to slow down. It helps us become aware of all these steps and nuances and basics involved with what we have become masters in. The next up is the availability bias. And referring to our brains being efficient and loving shortcuts, this bias is one of our brain's favorite shortcuts. And availability bias is the notion that if something is easily recalled, it must be important, or at least more important than alternative solutions which are not as readily recalled. And this can lead to risky decision-making and also hinder innovation by defaulting to the same old ideas. So as psychologist and behavioral economics expert Daniel Kahneman explains it, we usually operate as if what you see is all there is. And often there is a level of emotion tied to this information being recalled as well, thus adding another layer of hindrance. So for example, in truth, you have a 1 in 3.75 million chance of being attacked by a shark. However, during Shark Week, the frequent reporting of shark attacks and also depictions in media misleads people to perceive the actuality and circumstances of these shark attacks. So when people recall this information being reported, they avoid the beach and the water due to fear of being attacked by a shark. And oftentimes when we get stuck within this bias, it's because we are giving more weight to current or easily recalled information instead of pushing ourselves and diving deeper within our thoughts. Especially when it comes to brainstorming sessions. A lot of people that I have observed usually stick to their one or first 5 ideas that they throw out, and they definitely advocate for these ideas, which is totally cool. I mean, like, these are your ideas that you came up with, but I know that there are more ideas that you can definitely throw out than just these 5 ideas. So for us to be disruptive innovators, we need to require ourselves to deliberately push ourselves beyond these top of mind ideas and recollections and dive deeper than that. So I'm going to do another quick activity. I'm going to give you all about 45 seconds to come up with as many ways a pen can be used other than a writing instrument. So write down your answers on a separate piece of paper. I'll set my timer for about 45 seconds. And again, write down the different ways a pen can be used aside from a writing instrument.
Okay. I'm already blanking.
I immediately went to a famous movie.
All right, so we have about 15 seconds left. All right, time. So in chat, who here has came up with about 2 ideas? And if you,
someone mentioning John Wick knows how to use a pen, which actually, I don't know, I haven't seen that, but my first thought was like use it as a stabbing device.
It's
weird.
Yeah, so that means we're thinking the same thing. So yeah, that's
yeah.
You can use it as a multi-tool. So like the pen that you have over there, the clip that you used to clip onto your shirt, you can take that off. You can use it to pry things. You can take it apart, disassemble it, use the spring inside to maybe prop something up if you needed to do that, or you could use the spring, uncoil it to tie something if you needed to bind something. There are lots of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was your question like the number?
Yeah, just about 2 ideas. Who here came up with like about 5 ideas, and who had about 10 ideas or more?
So someone had 4, we have 5, we have 8, I had
Okay.
5.
had
No
5.
one I know like had 10.
Okay.
All right, Doji had 5. Yeah, so our max was 8. Whew,
Oh, that's pretty awesome. So when we usually do this activity, we typically do it in 2 rounds. And what we usually find in the second round is that there are more ideas and uses for the pen. And sometimes they become even a bit more outlandish as well. When we did this with the New York State office for AARP, someone even mentioned like a sex toy. So I was like, whoa. All right, but great use of a pen, I guess. But this is a great tool and activity to help train your mind to push beyond your first thoughts and to think beyond what you think you are capable of, and also to frame the pen in a different perspective. And you can also try this by switching the pen with like other different items, such as like maybe paper clips or boots, or maybe even like your headphones, and try that out as well. So I just have another question as well. So who here likes to order the same item from their favorite restaurant? I know I do. One of my favorite restaurants around here is called Bob and Edith's, and I always order the same breakfast meal every day, regardless of the time that I'm ordering from. So I'm just curious if you can all share in just chat, what is your favorite restaurant and what is your favorite go-to meal?
Let's see. Well, this would just tempt you to come visit us in Oklahoma City, Coy.
I know you guys, yeah, I think you guys have really good barbecue. Last time I was there, I had really good barbecue, but I forgot what the restaurant was called.
Doji, the Applebee's Cowboy Burger. I have no idea what that is, but it's really funny.
I'm assuming it's delicious.
It's so
okay,
good.
and then of course, Gaia and I, we need to go to brunch soon, it sounds like. But our favorite is this. Actually, it's a Guatemalan place called Cafe Cacao. Super popular. Like always a 2 to 3 hour wait on the weekends. And Gaia said like the omelet ranchero. We also have someone who picked a spot in Dallas called Papa Do. Love their she loves their fried crawfish and fish platter and a Greek salad. Yum.
Oh yeah, that all just
It sounds like Louisiana.
So kind of like pushing forward from this conversation, I definitely appreciate you all sharing your favorite meals, but I would also like to say that we are all creatures of habit. So I'm assuming before the COVID days where we had quarantine, we took the same route to work. For me, I always took the same route to work. I would always drive to Huntington Metro Station, and from there, I would take the yellow line to Washington, D.C., and that was the same route that I took to work every day. Same thing with my favorite news channel. I would always stick to the same news channel, stick to the same websites to read my favorite blogs or articles, etc. And so the next bias that I'm discussing and wanted to talk a little bit more about is called the status quo bias. And the status quo bias is what makes us default to keeping things the same. It is all about our preference for the current state of affairs. As I mentioned before, we are creatures of habit, and that's okay. We know what we like, what we don't like, and when we like something, we tend to stick with it. And I'm sure that played a big role in our survival back in the days where, hey, this berry is delicious and it hasn't killed anyone. So let's keep eating this berry because all the other berries we're not so sure about, and we know that this berry is not poisonous. So whenever new opportunities arise, especially when it comes to being creative and also innovation, we would rather stay with what we have than to switch to something new. So in other words, we think the old ideas have always worked, so why change them? However, as technology continues to grow, cultures begin to shift, and the behaviors of our end users and consumers change in either opposition or adaptation in response to this growing technology and cultural shift, we as innovators and creatives, we have to grow with it, no matter how uncomfortable we are with these decisions. So there was a paper published in the Journal of Risk and Uncertainty by Samuelson and Zeckhauser, and they provide an example of the status quo bias in action by loyal Coca-Cola drinkers. So in the 1980s, Coca-Cola actually introduced a new Coke recipe with this weird taste. I'm just assuming it probably had more sugar or something like that. But in blind taste tests, they were given samples and being given the option of which one they would prefer, the old Coke or the new Coke. And the new Coke actually outperformed in blind taste tests. Outperformed the classic Coke. So however, though the Coke Classic, however, when they reinstated or when they decided to sell the new Coke and push that into market, they realized that the Coke Classic actually proceeded to outsell the new Coke with 3 times as many more sales, even though there was a clear preference in their study for the new Coke. And this is an example of the status quo bias, because the status quo bias actually governed people's actions as they stuck with what they were accustomed to. So in fact, there were some reports that people experienced depression due to the changing of an American classic, which was Coca-Cola. And due to the outcry and backlash of the new push with new Coke, Coke actually decided to start bringing back classic Coke back onto the shelves instead of trying to discontinue it fully. Another example of the status quo bias in action in more recent times is Toys R Us. So a little bit of history about Toys R Us. It was founded in 1948 by Charles Lazarus, and Toys R Us has become one of the most iconic and renowned international toy sellers. However, 70 years later after its founding, they closed their doors and they filed for bankruptcy in 2018, I believe. And we can go through a list of reasons why they failed, but one reason that definitely sticks out to me and that I would like to point out is that they failed to adapt and innovate, and they got stuck within their own status quo bias, believing that they were the center of the toy universe. And what they didn't do was they did not keep up with technology and explore different options. They did not change with the changing behaviors of their consumers, unlike their competitors who were embracing technology and innovation and beginning to sell and actively push e-commerce to all their customers. So to quote the director of retail studies at Columbia University, Mark A. Cohen, Toys R Us was still trading on the view that they were the center of the universe of the toy industry. And that eventually led to their downfall because they refused different avenues and ways that they can continue to sell their toys to people who had changing preferences of how they wanted to shop. So if you're wondering what is one way you can break out of your own status quo, is try to think of ideas that can get you fired. And get fired ideas are impractical, they are impossible, they are totally expensive, sometimes immoral. But you have to remember that these are just ideas that you can build more ideas from, and that we are not going to move forward and implement it. So think big, and when the time comes, manage it down to something that is a lot more appropriate and that fits in scope. So let's practice this. I want you all to post in chat and to come up with a few get fired ideas on the following problem. So how might we get older adults to be more physically active? And remember that get fired ideas are impractical, they are impossible, immoral, illegal, or downright expensive. And remember that we're in a safe space. These are just all exploratory. So feel free to have fun. And again,
so how might we Get
How
adults to get.
Yep. How might we get older adults to be more physically active?
And from there, how we get fired for that idea.
Yep. Come up
Okay.
with a list that could be fired.
Toss them all on an island.
Toss them in the island. Okay.
A little bit more context. I just mentioned get lions and tigers and bears
Oh.
and toss them all on an island.
I see. Okay.
Okay, we make it a law.
You said law?
Yeah, make it a law. I guess that they have to be physically active. You gotta break stuff, Grant. You gotta get. How would you get fired for that idea?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. This does feel like wrong a little bit. So I didn't type it yet, but I was thinking like, okay, like tie them up kind of like horses. So like everyone, like they're a team, they have to work together, but they're tied up. Sounds terrible.
Okay.
We have threatened physical injury for being lazy. We could take away their license to drive and give them bicycles.
Okay.
That sounds so nice. Ban all the meat from stores and projectile weapons. Let the cows roam free.
Yeah. So you just let the cows go and then be like, there's no meat in stores. You have to go get it yourselves.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, go catch it.
No projectile weapons, so you have to chase these things down yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, getting old school.
Yeah.
You like to eat, must go kill it.
Yeah, I think these are all great. So the main idea here is to have people break out of their comfort zones and any restrictions that they set on themselves. And it's actually easier to take a big, wild, and crazy idea and tame it down to something that is easier to actually implement. So I think when someone said, let's put them on an island and fill the island with lions, tigers, and all these predatory animals. So what you can take away from that is, well, what happens if we create some form of service where seniors can volunteer to walk dogs? Because what we know about some seniors is sometimes they're a little bit isolated. Sometimes they don't really have the full finances and capabilities to take care of animals, as they are sometimes living beyond their means. But by opening up an animal shelter that allows seniors as volunteers, they can get that type of engagement where they are working and engaging with other animals who might need an extra love and attention. But also as they participate in certain activities like walking adoptable pets, they're also staying active. So it's kind of like an interesting way of reframing and looking at some of these crazy ideas and digesting it to something a lot more, I guess, legal and possible as well.
Yeah, you really walk that back from the toss them on the island with lions and bears to going for a walk with the dog.
Yeah,
I like it a lot.
So the last bias that I would like to discuss is called the framing bias. And framing is the way individuals, groups, and societies organize, perceive, and communicate about their own reality. It influences how we perceive information and also act in any given situation. So framing creates a mental filter that alters how information is also retained in our minds. And it is this interesting paradigm through which we perceive reality. And although you might not be aware of your frame when coming up with an idea, it encompasses all of our unconscious assumptions during decision making. So going back to the example where I fed you the information about myself and asked you to kind of think of what kind of car I have, I actually created or instilled this level of kind of created a filter amongst your thought process. So you were focused more on, oh, well, Coy has 4 dogs. He's a creative. So this is my perception of what people like Coy might actually have in regards to having a car. Also, if you're ever in a grocery store, an interesting that I found out about is the labeling on meat packages. So studies have shown that people actually prefer to purchase meat labeled 75% lean versus 25% fat, as they perceive 75% lean to be healthier. Now they are both like the same thing. It's just the phrasing is totally different, which skews the perception of information and how a person perceives that information. So they believe one is actually better than the other when they're actually equal. So one of my favorite case studies to read, and that showcases how shifting one's perception can totally change an experience, is the MRI Redesign for children. So there's a designer from General Electric called Doug Dietz. A few years back, he finished a redesign of an MRI machine. So by everyone's standard, it was beautiful. It was sleek, it was modern, it looked very futuristic. All the hospital staff that it was tested in, they all loved it. And so when he was asked if he would like to visit a facility where his new MRI machine was installed, Doug took the opportunity to see this MRI machine in action. In fact, Doug mentions to the technician that his design for this MRI machine has been submitted for an International Design Excellence Award, which is the design equivalent of an Oscar. However, when the technician asked him to step outside the hallway as a patient was scheduled for an MRI scan, he witnessed who the patient was, and it was this visibly frightened girl. She had tears streaming down her face, and she was hand in hand with her parents. It was then that Doug Dietz realized that though his design was flawless in the eyes of adults, it was a frightening experience for children. He saw that it was like a child was being entered into this cavernous, monstrous mouth. So Doug eventually reworked his design for the MRI, and he installed fun graphics across the MRI machine, which you can see here in this picture. And so he had different variations of his machines, such as one had like pirate ship graphics taped across it. One was kind of fitted to look more like a spaceship. And so due to its redesign, the amount of sedation for MRIs for children was actually drastically reduced, because he also realized that in order for a child to sit still and go through the MRI process, they actually had to be sedated for that. So by shifting the perspective of what the child was seeing and how they are experiencing this machine, he was able to create a different experience that better fit their needs. And it was only him until he realized that he was thinking in the eyes and seeing things in the eyes of an adult rather than a child who also uses the MRI machine as well. So one fun activity, whenever we get stuck or we stay too long within a specific frame of mind, is we play this activity called Star Power. And here's how it works. So step one is we pick a famous person that we know enough about them that we can make assumptions about how they will solve a problem. Next is we embody that persona and come up with ways that person would actually solve the problem. So here on the slide, I have Oprah Winfrey, that's Tony Stark, and that's also Taylor Swift. And whenever we do exercises like these, it's definitely fun to see, especially since Oprah is very well known. So a lot of the things that we hear is like, you get a gym, everyone gets a gym. And like that's the idea that they come up with when trying to solve for the challenge that I mentioned before. How might we get older adults to be more physically active? Now, this idea is rather large, possibly expensive to be building gyms individually for older adults. But what we can take away from that idea of everyone gets a gym and scaling it back is, well, how about if we partner with local gyms and we work with them to drastically reduce the cost of gym memberships where it's affordable for every older adult? That way they have access to a gym in order to remain physically active. So that is like one example of how we embody the use of star power. It helps us to push our ideas even further, and also to kind of shift our perspective and thinking by embodying a different person. So one thing about like Taylor, of Tony Stark is he tends to be more aggressive and innovative and also riskier, but he's also a connector where he assembles a group of people and experts. So some of the key takeaways here that whenever we embody Tony Stark is, well, maybe this can be more of a collaborative effort. So let's pull in different people from different parts of the organization to help and move this project even forward. Taylor Swift, as you know, is notorious for her songs written about her ex-boyfriends. So maybe when we're embodying Taylor Swift, we're pulling from our own personal experiences to solve this particular challenge. So I'm just curious, what other celebrities or famous people, whether if they are fictional or not, would you call upon to help you think differently? So here I said Oprah, Tony Stark, and Taylor Swift. I'm interested to see what else you guys think would be good people to embody.
Yeah, that's fun. Let's see. Any comments in Slack on additional? Superman. Yeah, you picked three really good ones because we have one, they're very famous, but also like I can feel their personality, like even just like looking at their picture. I'm trying to think of other people who like you can feel their personality. You can go political and say either like President Trump or President Biden or Obama.
Oh, yeah.
Like how would they solve something?
Yeah. I think they're definitely great to embody considering they have such big personalities and notable different characteristics about them and how they go and present themselves or talk about certain problems.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of the like visual, like a branding exercise. Like, okay, well, what celebrity embodies your brand? Like, if you had to pay someone to be in your commercial and you had all the money, like, who would be in your commercial to embody you? Like
yeah,
like even like Jennifer Garner is all like wholesome and whatnot, face washes, whatever.
She's always smiling.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's that like young girl, like Greta?
Oh, Thornburg, I think.
Thornburg, yes. That would kind of be fun just to see how someone like on an extreme like activism side could solve a problem. Kind of just putting out someone kind of random, but
yeah,
in a specific niche.
Yeah.
We also have Gary Larson, who's the Far Side cartoonist, is mentioned in Slack.
Okay. I'm not familiar with them, but I'll definitely look him up.
Me neither. I've heard of Far Side, but
yeah,
the cartoon.
Yeah, I think these are great suggestions. And so like the main point here is to, when you feel like you have run out of ideas and you are stuck and you're just trying to break out of this creative rut, sometimes embodying a different person, whether fictional or not, whether if they are famous or not, some of my friends and also coworkers would actually embody their their parents or their siblings, and they would ask themselves, like, what would my sister do in this situation? So that's definitely one way that you can use, and one tool that you can use to push yourself and push your thinking beyond what you're capable of. So that was the last bias that I wanted to cover today. So I just wanted to do a quick recap. So it's always great to stay fresh and to explore different ways to introduce new experiences into your life. We talked about cognitive biases, which are short mental shortcuts that help us process information even faster. And that we have 4 biases to be aware of, which is the curse of knowledge bias. And one way we can battle that is trying to embody the beginner's mindset and to try to experience things for the first time once again. Next up was availability bias. And we combated that by pushing through our first top of mind ideas by using the pen exercise. And again, you don't really have to use a pen, you can use anything, but this is just a way for you to train your mind to push beyond the first level of ideas that you come up with. Next up was the status quo bias, and that was just roughly about being stubborn and preferring to keep things the way they are. You can push yourself and move past that by coming up with fireable ideas. And next and last was the framing bias, which was how we can shift our perspective. And to do that, we can channel the power of the stars or people who are close to us to help us come up with different ideas. So with that said, that wraps up our talk for the day. I believe we have about maybe 5 or maybe 10 minutes left, but I want to leave this remaining time for Q&A.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, so I did just post the link in Slack. So if anyone wants to hop in and ask a question yourself, you don't have to put video on or whatever you want to do, or feel free to chime in with a comment or questions in Slack, and we'll go ahead and get those answered.
So I did have something that I observed. You talked about De Bono, and I think it's the same De Bono, the guy who came up with the De Bono's thinking caps.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of combining that with the use star power exercise. So you have a problem and you say, these are the different stars, how would each one go through and solve that problem? Same thing with the thinking hat exercise, but you can only think as this person, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be like maybe a really good way to kind of get people thinking about the same problem the same way.
Yeah, definitely. We always find that, especially like when we definitely use this activity a lot when we were trying to come up with names for products that we were developing. So we would definitely choose sometimes the most outrageous personality out there, which sometimes kind of skewed along the lines of musicians, such as like Lady Gaga or Kanye West. And the reason being is that sometimes when we're coming up with names to name our products or apps that we're trying to develop, we kind of stick to the usual, which usually ends up with Lee at the end, L-Y, like Apply, Googly, etc. But it's funny, like how when we embody like Lady Gaga, for example, like it completely changes the way that we try to come up with names, or even like Kanye West, most notably because him and I believe Kim Kardashian, his wife, Kim Kardashian, like they named their children such interesting names, like I think Northwest, and I forgot who her other kid is, but like it's just really interesting what other people can come up with. Sometimes I think when you embody people rather than, I guess, set caps or words, you're able to add a level of personality to it than what you can with something that you can't really relate to as much. if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes
I think
sense.
it goes back to like your one of your first exercises when you're like, okay, like what kind of car do I drive? Like just without really knowing you have some dogs and you live in Virginia. What like persona with that few information, what do you put off? So, like there wasn't a word, but there's like, what kind of car do you think I would be driving?
Yeah. So I think when people, or when I ask that question, like people like instantly gravitate towards, and I wouldn't really, so they instantly like gravitate towards like the profession, the amount of, I guess, things that I have in my life. And also like, I guess the location. So Washington, DC, Alexandria area is definitely a little bit more, more urban. So maybe the space I have for my car might be a little bit more limited because I have to maneuver around the city and such. So possibly having a larger truck might not be exactly the most practical. So there's that layer of Coy is a designer. He has 4 dogs and he's also in the city. So there's this filter that is already applied that people begin to start layering in piece information together. So yeah, I mean, like in my own choosing of the car, I knew that, you know, a truck would exactly not be comfortable for me. But when looking at the Kia Soul, I mean, like I could push down all the back seats and I have room to fit 2 dogs at the time, but now I can fit 4 dogs comfortably. But also be able to maneuver around such a densely populated area with ease. Oops.
So we are at time. We're at 12:30. I haven't seen any new questions come in. So Coy, I just really want to say thank you so much. Like you really kind of broke that down, and I'm glad we didn't, dive into 25 cognitive biases. That could be too much, but really focusing on a couple and having these, interactions and getting people to play along and interact with each other. I think that was really fun and really beneficial and kind of, it made it stick more in my head. It's something I already want to take back to my teams and see how can we use this as a workshop for our internal team and just kind of just spitball.
Yeah. Yeah, especially like when I'm working with other people, when I worked with other people across various parts of the organization, one of the things I always hear is like, I'm not creative enough. And I know they're creative. I mean, like we are born with it. Like we were all children once. And going back to like our childhood, we definitely had such large imaginations. So it's still there. It's just that we need to push ourselves beyond our what we have been conditioned to as adults of like what is appropriate, what we can or can't do, and push through that. And these are just ideas that we are using. We are not greenlighting them. We are not moving forward with them. We're just using these as ideas or things to start off from. It's from there we can apply that adult filter and start beginning to interpret these ideas into something a lot more plausible and in line with our market. But for me personally, I feel like it's always best to have fun and to explore as many ideas as possible, because when you don't do so, then you're coming up with a limited set amount of ideas without that much passion or belief behind it, which leads to riskier decision making and also in the long run kind of possibly setting your product or technology up to fail in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Coy, thank you again so much. That was wonderful. Everyone, please feel free to shoot an email, ask about his life, like work, this topic. And then also next month, April 28th, we have Emily Olson talking about service design again, April 28th. And so we'll see you guys next month. And thank you again, Coy.
All right. Thank you so much.